Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture 18 of web design and development, and in this lecture we are going to discuss about permanent storage and mainly focusing on permanent storage of MySQL database server. So in this lecture I am going to provide you an overview of MySQL data types. There are a number of data types available in MySQL server, and I will provide you a brief introduction that how can you use these data types to actually store your values in your database server. Then there will be small discussion about database backup and restore in PHP MySQL database server. So at this point I have an assumption that you must be familiar with the SQL named as structured query language, and you are familiar to operate on number of databases such as MySQL Server, Oracle, or my simple Microsoft SQL Server. So MySQL is not very different from the other server providers, and it is one of the leading open source relational database management server, and it is very easy to use. You do not you do not need to create hefty setups much like Microsoft SQL servers or Oracle servers. It is a small application and you can easily integrate it with number of applications. So it is fast because it is lightweight, and it runs on a number of devices very easily. So it provides you enough security so you can deal with number of commercial and business applications. So it has a multi-operating system support. That means you can run in the MySQL on Windows, Linux, and Mac operating systems. And you can also run on the Android systems, and it is free of cost for personal and limited application use, such as if you want to build the application for uh, businesses. So there is technical support also available if you want to enhance your application to enterprise applications. So it also supports large amount of large databases, and you can have up to 50 million rows in your database, and you can have the file size limit of 8 million terabytes, which is quite enough. So this slide shows a simple example to create a database in MySQL Server, which is very much similar to the Microsoft SQL Server. So you can create a database using the create database command, and you can use the database using the use and providing the name of the database server. So to run the MySQL, you can go to the start menu and run the command prompt, and then you can run the MySQL from the command prompt if you have installed the MySQL server. And then on the command prompt of the MySQL window, you can use the create database command and provide the name of the database to create a new database. So before creating table, you should look at the number of data types available in MySQL server. So I will provide you a brief outline that how many data types are available and how can you use them. So the basic data type is referred as character n, which specifies exactly n number of characters and which is less than 255 total. So that means if you use a variable or a column with the character 5, it will store 5 bytes of value. That means each character will be in the 1 byte storage. So if you have a large amount of storage and you want to store a small value such as a goodbye message, the all 57 bytes will be covered for the goodbye message. So in these cases, you can use a better alternative, that is variable characters, which is not the exact, but it is up to n number of characters. That means if you have small number of characters, the length of your data type will be small, and if you have large characters up to 65,535, your variable characters will adjust to the number of characters in your input. Similarly, there are other data types to store the text, and the simple data type is the tiny text, which stores up to 255 characters, and text stores this amount of value. And if you have large amount of text, you can use the long text and provide n amount of value. Similarly, if you want to store the binary data, you have the blob data type, and there are four data types named as tiny blob, blob, medium blob, and long blob. So you can use any of these available data types depending upon the size of the input binary text. So if the binary text is a small value, you can use the tiny blob, and if it is a large image, and you can use a medium or a long blob. The numbers are stored using the integers and floating or double values. So there are two types of numbers, signed and unsigned. So the smallest amount of integer numbers are tiny int. If you want to store more bigger number, then you can use small int, and then medium int, integer int, or big int. Similarly, if you want to store the floating point values, you have the float data type and the double data type. So as you can see, if you move from bottom to top to bottom, you can see that each type contains number of bytes in the increasing order. For example, TinyInt stores value in 1 byte, and it can store up to 255 values, and in the same way BigInt stores in the 8 byte, which can contain a large amount of value in the number. Similarly, float is stored in the 4 bytes, and the double value is stored in the 8 bytes. So you can use the date time values to store the dates and the times. So date time stores the date and the time in the specified format. Only date value stores the date of your input value. The timestamp stores the time and the date on which the entry is created or edited. The time value only uses the time format specified, and the year only uses the year from the date. So there is a variation to store binary variables named as binary or byte and variable binary. However, the difference is that in the blob data type, you store the value into the binary value. There is no character data set for the binaries. However, in the binary or variable binary value is stored as characters, but it contains the characters as a binary data. That means the binary data stored in the textual form or a character form. However, in the block, the binary data is stored in the only binary form, just such as numbers from 0 1. So detailed help in describing your fields can be found online at the MySQL user manual, and there are two links that are very useful to start uh, before starting your database application, which will help you to find out the specific data types for your particular input value. Whenever you are storing database on your data server, there is chance that you need a backup and a restore function to take those backup to another server or another application. So most times data stored on the databases must have some value. Even if there is no value, only the cost of the time required for the re-entering it should be the hardest fail. Also, there will be time to migrate database over a new server. The best way to do this is usually back it up at first. So backing up and restoring in MySQL data is easy with the MySQL dump command. So with MySQL dump command, a database or a collection of database are dumped into one or more files containing all the instructions necessary to recreate all the tables and populate them with the stored data. So it can also generate the files in the comma separated values CSV format and other delimited text format or even in the XML format. So its main drawback is to make sure that no one writes to a table when it is backing up. So the easiest solution to this problem is to shut down the MySQL server before running MySQL dump command and start the server again after the after running the MySQL dump command. So the basic format of MySQL command is shown here. You can write MySQL dump, you can provide the -u, and then provide the user, -p, then provide the password, and then name of the database you want to dump. So MySQL dump can send the backup data directly to a file using a direction operator. Assuming the backup file is a publication.sql, you can type the command in the following method. So you remember to replace the username and the password with the correct details of your database credentials. So you can write the MySQL dump -u and then provide the name of the user. Similarly, p with the password and then the name of the database or databases, and then provide the direction operator. You want to direct this output to a publication.sql file. So to back up all the MySQL database at once, including the system database such as MySQL, you can use a command which would enable to restore an entire MySQL database installation. Remember to use locking where required. So you can use the MySQL dump user password and then provide the all database command and then link it to the file named all underscore databases dot sql. On the other hand, to perform the restore from a file, you can call MySQL executable and pass it to the file restoring using the direction operator in the reverse order. So to recover an entire database that was dumped using the all database option, you can write out the command MySQL, provide the user and a password, and fed it with all the database dot my .sql file. So similarly, to restore a single database, you can use the D option to followed by the name of the database where the publication database is being restored from the database backup mode. Restoring of the publication database will be like this. You can fed the MySQL database with a user and a password and provide the database -d, name of the database, and then publication dot my publication dot sql. You can also dump the data in the CSV format. The MySQL dump command is very flexible and supports various types of output such as CSV format. So this example shows to dump the data from the classics and the customers table in the publication database to the files classics.txt and the customers.txt in the folders c/temp. So the dumping data to CSV format files is described as here. MySQL dump -u again password and no create info -tab provide the location of your file and then fields terminated by comma and then name of the database, which will store this database into a CSV file. So whenever designing your application database, these are some advices you should take very carefully. So you have to describe your fields correctly. It is utmost important that your field must match your application data types. That means the input data from the application must be stored in relevant formats so that when it is accessed back, uh, there should be minimum transformation required to actually show it onto the some another web pages. Similarly, describe your data in a tight format. That means you provide the linking between the tables and the joins between the tables in a very accurate manner. Also, it is a good practice to secure your server very well, that you do not allow users to directly access your database server or directly send commands to your database servers. So there are some different mechanics which will help you to actually secure your server. You can implement these mechanics to secure your server, such as employing hash functions for using and storing passwords in the databases, etc. Then you can use a number of manuals to get advice on that how you should store different type of fields in your server. So if you want to study more about the topic, you can read the chapter 5 of the recommended book, or this URL can also help you to understand more about the SQL data types. If you have any question, you can ask me, or you can conduct a question and answer session. Thank you very much.